So here we are at Arlene Schulman, the first 100 years. We are at the Manhattan Borough President's office, Gail Brewers at 1 Center Street. Thank you so much, Gail. Here we have a photo exhibit. Let me take the camera around a bit so we can see just what the space looks like. It's quite an interesting, very long space. And this exhibit consists of photographs of boxing, baseball, cops on the beat, and neighbors of ours in Manhattan. So rather than start at the beginning or even the end, we'll do something a little bit different. We'll start in the middle. What you'll see is a description of some of the photographs, a little history, and little technical details. So here we are. One of my favorite photographs is called Hand with Flowers. This is a photograph of an older African-American woman in her 80s whose hands, when you look very closely, look like they are carved. And there's a juxtaposition of daisies there. All of the photographs in the exhibit were taken in black and white using film. Anyone remember that? Now keep in mind, this is a one-camera broadcast with a microphone. And like the early days of television, anything can happen. Think of kinescope for anyone who goes back that far. So to the left is actually a little sign that tells you about my history. It's a press release. Arlene Schulman, photographer, writer, editor, filmmaker, teacher, hater of lima beans and olives. No way. Arlene Schulman started photographing the people of New York City when she was an 8-year-old living in Brooklyn. That would be East New York, and a shout out to my peeps who grew up with me in the Linden houses. Using an Agfa 35mm camera handed down to her by her father, I still have the camera, who taught her how to shoot, develop, and print black and white film, she captured her sharp eye for detail and an uncanny ability to demolish the wall between subject and camera to reveal the truth of who we are. Ms. Schulman's astonishing, oh sorry, that's extraordinary, sorry, Karen Taylor, who wrote this. Ms. Schulman's extraordinary body of work, immortalized in books of majestic photographs and in films and photographic essays, illuminates facets of New York City that the majority of us never see. Gritty city living, boxing gyms, baseball dugouts, police officers on the beat. Capturing the heroes, colleagues, and neighbors among us in gritty, straightforward, large format images that celebrate and ennoble the human condition, Ms. Schulman brings her life's work together for the very first time. Arlene Schulman, the first 100 years, yay, is a unique vision of life in New York City as she has lived it, and a foreshadowing of what she and we may see during the next 100. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Shelton Miner, who has joined us. My sister Ruth Sternberg is here with us. Here in front of us is a very unusual photograph. This is called the Spitting Cup. This was taken at a boxing gym in San Francisco, and I love the lines here. You have the angle of the padding on the left. You have a little, you have the spitting cup itself, the bars. It's very interesting graphic, and I'm not sure if everyone would know what it was unless we had the caption here. Just a pause to reflect. The photographs, again, all taken with black and white film, are printed in large print. That was one of Gail Brewer's staff members gliding by. We are in the office nonetheless, and people are working. The photographs were taken from the mid-1980s to the present. And one thing that you will see in this exhibit and any exhibit of mine, if I have my way, is large size captions. There's nothing worse than being in an exhibit with 10-point captions and everyone huddled together trying to see them. Mine are 40 points. They're large. You can see them across the room, and they're also a bit more, or I should say a lot more accessible for those who may have some visual impairments. But nonetheless, the idea is to be able to stand at any point in the room and to read the captions. And this one is Worries, a Student in Harlem. And if there's no zoom on the camera, but we'll move in a little bit and you can see something in her face and in her eyes. Now moving to my left is a photograph called The Haircut, open to many interpretations. This is of a little boy getting his hair cut in a barbershop in East Harlem, holding a machine gun water pistol. So you see the hands of the barber on his head, you see the toy that he's playing with. And in the background, just to give it a little shadowing there, is you see a couple of, at least one, it might be a second customer there. Okay, here is Black White Identity. This is taken in a crafts class in Harlem. And what was so interesting was it was a little girl making a mask, and the mask was of a white girl. So that's very interesting concept here. And here we have Harlem Scene. This is taken in Harlem, and I like the shadow of the woman, a nurse at one of the churches, walking on, I believe that is 7th Avenue. So we'll go over most of them, but unfortunately, I don't think anybody will be here for 2 hours. And thank you, Shelton, for that wonderful comment, and I for the essence of the image that has been developed over many years. Thank you, and thank you, Ruth, as well. This is actually a photograph of my aunt, Esther Addis Nachman, while she was living in the Bronx. What is unique to this photo is the shadow across half her face, and if you look at the dress, the pattern of the dress mimics the pattern of the fire escape gate. That was not intentional. Auntie Esther lived there for about 50 years until she passed away about 10 years ago. Here we have an image of Reza Malka Hartz, one of the founders of Inwood Jews, on her wedding day to Rabbi Herschel Hartz. And what you see is this beautiful dress and the attentiveness of her sister, who is to our right, and the other bridesmaids. And you can see how carefully crafted the veil is. And you see tradition for more than 100 years being embodied in this photograph. So here we have a woman in a church. Her name is Queenie. Yes, she does look very queen-like. To the left is, unfortunately, I do have very photographic relatives, or did. This is my grandmother, Noni, Anna Addis David, who is celebrating her 95th birthday in a nursing home in Brooklyn. She was originally born in Yanina, one of the original Roman Yote Jews. The family settled on the Lower East Side and founded Kehila Kadosha Yanina. You'll see the Addis name throughout some of the materials and plaques. She moved up to the Bronx, University Avenue, where many of the Greek Jews settled. And she was asked by yours truly, what did she think about all day? She would sit around with everyone else, and she said, oh, what do you think? I'm waiting to die. In this photograph, we have Ivan Perez, also known as Madison Banks. Madison Banks is and Ivan is a drag performer, and this is a photograph as a still from my video, I Am Ivan Most of the Time. And here, if we clue in a little bit, what I like is the vulnerability of his face. And in the video, you could see the transformation between of Ivan metamorphosing into Madison Banks' personality changed. Visually, of course, that changed. Here we have an old friend of mine, Linda Colon, with her daughter Jessie. And Jessie was just a few months old. They were living in their Washington Heights apartment at the time. And it's a beautiful photograph that shows the love between mother and child. And you can see Linda just sort of lost in space looking out the window. Here is another image from that same Harlem church as Queenie, and look at the little eyes peeping over. It's really an unusual photograph. Just managed to capture the child at the right time. And you see the pulpit, you see some of the other parishioners, and you see the prayer book and the child. To our left is another photograph of my Auntie Esther. This is my great aunt again, Esther Addis Nachman, who was born in Yanina, Greece. She settled on the Lower East Side and finally to the Kingsbridge section of the Bronx. There was always something very sad in her eyes. And as you get closer and closer and closer, you can really see that she didn't have an easy life. When she was first married to her second husband, I think not long after they were married, she discovered her stepdaughter was murdered in their apartment. I remember the story clearly. She woke up, the daughter didn't wake up, tried to rouse her out of bed, and she had been stabbed to death by the man that she was seeing. Very tragic and something that she still talked about towards the end of her life. What was interesting though about the Kingsbridge section of the Bronx is she was a bit hard of hearing. She had one of those old TVs with the rabbit ears, and she would play Gunsmoke. It was so loudly you practically had to duck in the hallway and call the police. It was really loud. But this is my great aunt Esther Addis Nachman representing the Roman Yote Jews. Here is the signage for the show, might as well include that. And now we're moving along to my right. Okay, we're now in the boxing world right now. This is the Rome Boxing Club, which was in the Bronx at the old Jerome Boxing Club. It's an old post office on 145th and 3rd Avenue. The reason it does not say Jerome is that it was retitled and the artwork put in for a movie. So what I like about this one and what you'll notice is you'll see the shadows, you see the boxing behind him, but look at his hands. This guy has huge hands. They also look like he's been in a few fights because it looks like you see scar tissue and they're kind of puffy. I don't know his name, but it's one of my favorite photographs. And it is in a collection of a museum whose name I can't remember. But nonetheless, here is Rome Boxing Club. Okay, we're scooting past the offices here onto the next wall. And we have Ray Arcel, one of the most famous boxing trainers in the history of the sport here. Ray trained many champions, including Roberto Duran, and he is now featured in the movie Hands of Stone as being portrayed by Robert De Niro. There is actually quite a likeness, but you can see his eyes. Look how intelligent they are. He is posing behind a painting by this wonderful painter named Susan Capello. Susan's father, Danny, was also a fighter, and her father was, along with Ray, involved in Ring 8, the Veteran Boxers Association, and they tried very hard to help out indigent fighters, those who needed extra medical care like Sandy Sadler. But he was a wonderfully and extraordinarily, not only talented, very intuitive man. He knew how to handle his fighters. Now, oops, a little close, but here we are. But again, look at the intelligence of the eyes. Here is Marvin Hagler, world middleweight champion, and this photograph was taken in Canastota, New York at one of the Hall of Fame ceremonies. One thing that I really try and aim for in my photographs is, there's sometimes is a preponderance of bullshit where you need to add this, you need to add this, you need to Photoshop that. The photographs are straightforward, and they are a look at the person, into their intelligence, into sometimes their sadness and sorrow. To our left is Jose Torres, light heavyweight boxing champion, taken in Spanish Harlem. When he became champion, he was feted all around town. In this photograph, I had long retired, of course, he agreed to put on his old robe, his boxing shoes. He knocked on someone's door, went onto the fire escape, and the crowds appeared again like magic to come out and celebrate him again. He was also an author, and he was also president, I think this is the correct title, of the New York State Athletic Association. I'm not sure who this is, but this is a young kid won a trophy in what was called the Kids Gloves. The Kids Gloves was a boxing tournament that was started by John Condon, who was the president of boxing at Madison Square Garden. Don't think it's on now, but you had kids from 10 to 16 came out during the summer in different venues around the city. I think this actually was taken by Madison Square Garden, but I'm not really sure. And once again, you can see our easy to read captions, okay? Now, as long as we're here, let me give a word to our sponsor. Oops, I have a message saying storage almost full. I have no idea what that means, but we'll go until we go. A thank you to Schnippers, who sponsor the reception. I'm a long-time customer. They now opened another outpost, this time on Church Street. Great hamburgers, great shakes, love the salads. So thank you to Schnippers. And I'm going to try and open the box so you could see what the burger looks like. I didn't eat anything from it, but this being live television, oh look, actually looks pretty good. This is a Tribeca burger with brie. Highly recommend. Okay, yes, and thank you to Schnippers. We also have, that's my camera. That's actually one of them that I used, a Canon 81. You can see it's pretty banged up, a little dusty, and held together with tape. So here we are again live at the Borough President's office, Gail Brewer at 1 Center Street. A great thank you to Gail and her staff for giving me the opportunity to show my work here. The first time so many of it has been together under one roof. So we'll move a little more quickly. We have Lou Ambers, a world lightweight champion, and his wife is holding his chin, and you could see his cauliflower ear. And that came from many years of getting banged and bruised. And who knew? I heard the expression cauliflower ear, but I had never seen that before. Wow. So we have Hector Camacho, and that was taken at his home in Lake Okeechobee, Florida. And Azuma Nelson. I traveled to Ghana and photographed the king of boxing in Ghana, and he really was treated like the king. So we have a wonderful view from Gail's offices. So we're passing by a window. Here is one of my keynote photographs, and this is on the cover of my book, The Prize Fighters, The Professionals, taken at the Times Square Gym, which is no longer there in Manhattan. I actually knocked over people to get this shot. It was not staged. Okay, so keeping and moving along. Another great view. Here is an image of Roberto Duran's hand of stone. And it was interesting because they were actually very well manicured and they were actually very soft. But if you look at that middle knuckle, whew, looks like it got beat up a few times. And here is the prize fighter from Brooklyn. And now I'm just swinging over to my left. And we have the police photos. This is from a book called Cop on the Beat, Officer Steve Mayfield on patrol. So we have Stephen Mayfield, formerly of the 34th Precinct, patrolling on Dyckman Street in Inwood in Upper Manhattan. And that is Steve who is meticulous about his uniform, as you can see, which is really a direct contrast of what the streets look like. Here are two partners from the 34th Precinct. George Ruffino has since retired. Eileen is on patrol as well. And what I like is, look at their faces. There's something about the vulnerability in his face, and she's looking directly at the camera. Now again, I had a message saying that storage limit almost full, so if we lose the power, you'll know why, but so I'm going to move a little quickly. This is a photograph is from 23rd Precinct, The Job. This was the cover of the book, and this is a cop who called EMS for a heroin overdose. Heroin overdoses were very much more common in the 70s when so many men arrived back from Vietnam, and you would see in Bruce Davidson's photos, it was the Spanish Harlem had many heroin addicts. I mean, it's much better now, but this was the vestiges from the mid-1980s. The man is not dead. They're waiting. This photograph is really bittersweet. Steve Bonanno was a captain in the 23rd Precinct and then later in the 34th Precinct. Someone who moved right up the ladder from police officer to sergeant, lieutenant, captain, deputy inspector, inspector to deputy chief. I'm out of breath talking about his accomplishments, but he was amazing. He commanded the emergency services unit. He flew a copter in the aviation unit. And he was also someone that in his spare time flew children to different hospitals for medical treatment. Sadly, he passed away last year after being diagnosed and living with a rare form of blood cancer that was thought to be a result of the days that he spent working at Ground Zero after 9/11. Great guy, very personable, and very sad to see that he is no longer with us. And we have Mary Pollock has joined us. Welcome, Mary. We have a scene not uncommon of kids who are curious about the patrol car in East Harlem. We have sadly, death in East Harlem. We have a body bag. These are two men from the medical examiner's office who are removing the body, and you could see there's always a sense of theater, and there were always spectators wondering and watching. Emergency services. This is a woman who attempted suicide, and they were up on the roof bringing her down, and you can see the state of distress that she's in. Certainly conflicted. From what I gather from being at the scene. Here's a little portrait, too, and you can see the serious face and the smiling face of one police officer from the 34th Precinct. That was part of Cop on the Beat. Many times police officers have hats with photographs in them, and sometimes the photographs are of family members. This particular cop, who was single, had a photograph of his dog. So he held that up for display. And now we're going back to a little bit of the boxing. Again, remember, look at the eyes. Archie Moore, world light heavyweight champion, that was taken in San Diego at his home. So we have Leon Spinks. Very sad story. I mean, in fact, at one point, someone stole his teeth from the gym. When he went to work out, he left them, I think, on a bench. And someone took them. Okay. Here we have Jake LaMotta, who looks like Jake LaMotta, tough guy that was taken in Manhattan. He's still around. I think he's in his 90s. The West Side Boxing Club was on 163rd in St. Nicholas. That is no longer in existence, but this is a photograph from a sparring session. Here we have Sandy Sadler, the world featherweight champion. Look at the hands there as well. Okay, well, moving on to some baseball photographs. Oops, that's a little bit of the offices where the photographs are being exhibited. We have Ricky Henderson. All of these photographs were taken in the mid to late 1980s to early 1990s, and these were taken in the old Yankee Stadium. It's Ricky Henderson. We have Bobby Mercer, Mr. Yankee. He has a Yankee ring, hat, uniform, watch. And one of my favorites, because he's also a Brooklynite, is Willie Randolph, second baseman. Willie grew up in Brownsville, which is just the next neighborhood over from East New York. So we had certainly something to talk about with the old neighborhood. Here we have the Yankees clubhouse man, Pete Sheehy. Pete Sheehy knew everyone from Babe Ruth to Lou Gehrig and never disclosed any of their secrets, including mine. But I had the opportunity to follow him around and get to know him. His daughter and grandson joined us at the reception last week. So we have, again, take a look at, we're looking at shadow, we're looking at light, we're looking at eyes. Take a look at Ken Griffey, Sr., who was an outfielder with the New York Yankees. All the photographs were shot in black and white. The prints are interesting. They're almost like newsprint, but not quite. These are prints that were made by Staples, and they are called architectural prints. Technically, they're not made for photographs, but the work turned out fantastic. You really need a good print, a good JPEG, great contrast to begin with, and great shades of gray. Billy Martin, New York Yankees manager at the old Yankee Stadium. One of my favorite photographs, again, take a look at the eyes. There's something rather sad there. And you can see that's Claudell Washington, an outfielder with the New York Yankees. This is Dan Pasqua, who was also an outfielder. See, there's something about his bulk, the eyes. It looks like a very old-fashioned photo, but you see like the energy and enthusiasm of a rookie. And that's what he was at the time. We have Gene Michael, the New York Yankees coach. And as we're moving around to my right, this is a very long, extensive space here. We're back to boxing. This photograph is taken at the old Gramercy gym, and it's called the tear because as you get closer, you can see a little tear here. And these were two kids. They look like they're about 10, sparring. Okay. Let me go back to this for a second. The most famous trainer there was Cus D'Amato. And here we have Joe Frazier, world heavyweight champion, not from New York, but from Philadelphia. But he's known for his legendary bouts against Muhammad Ali. Now, to the right of that is actually an extended contact sheet. And I thought that might be interesting to see the selection process. You can go from one to the other and then see which one was chosen. And this one was. And you could see his eyes here. At once they look rather menacing, but it was actually much more sensitive than he let on many times. And one of my favorite people is Artemio Colon. And Artemio Colon was usually called Colon, was a boxing trainer in Washington Heights. He's in his 90s now. And that gym was in one of the worst blocks of Washington Heights during the 80s and 90s, drug dealing up and down the block. But that block itself became a salvation for so many young men in the neighborhood and saved so many lives as a result. Our last two photographs, fittingly, are of Officer Steve Mayfield, and Steve showed up at our reception. He was a police officer in the 34th Precinct, is now assigned to a special unit, and he's doing what's called a vertical patrol in an apartment building in Washington Heights. This photograph is from the book Cop on the Beat. Love the shadows. You have the outline of the police officer, and anything can happen. 1 foot off the stairs, you don't know what's below you, you don't know what's happening above. Okay, and here we also have Steve on Dyckman Street. What's very interesting is look at the graffiti, and then it looks pretty atrocious in terms of the lack of organization and cleanliness there, but he stands out because of the neatness of the uniform, his attentiveness, and just take a look at the hat. Everything was in order, so to speak. So it's really an interesting juxtaposition. So I'm just swinging around in a very general way so you can see how the show unfolded in the hallway. It's actually quite a large space. And around before we end. So just a little bit of a walkthrough. That's actually a photograph from Paris. And we're going to end on the same photograph that we started with. And here is the hand with flowers, one of my favorite photographs. It's actually on my business card. And once again, thank you very much to Gail Brewer and her staff, and also to Schnippers for sponsoring the reception. So we are over and out. Thank you everyone for joining us.